Way back in 1987, this landmark report called Our Common Future came out, and it diagnosed a global crisis that honestly feels more real today than ever. It dug into a problem that just doesn't seem to make any sense, something we're calling the Great Food Paradox. So, right at the heart of this whole thing is a massive, glaring contradiction. We live on a planet that, by all accounts, can grow enough food to feed every single person on it. And yet, the number of people going hungry keeps going up. How can those two things possibly be true at the same time? And the answer the report gives? Well, it's actually startlingly simple. The problem was never about a lack of food. We could always grow enough. The crisis was, and is, one of distribution. It's a fundamental failure of the system itself. And what's so powerful about this finding is how it just cuts through all the noise. The report says, point blank, the global food supply is there. The real issue is this huge disconnect. The food simply isn't getting to where the hungry people are. The system is just plain broken. Now, to really get why the system is so broken, the report basically identified two completely different worlds of agriculture, operating in parallel but deeply, deeply unequal. You could call it a tale of subsidy on one side and just total neglect on the other. And this really lays out that divide. On one hand, you've got these industrial farms in wealthy nations propped up by enormous government subsidies. This encourages them to produce way, way more food than they need, creating these massive surpluses that often get sold for super cheap to developing nations. And on the other hand, you have subsistence farmers in those same developing nations who get little to no support. They're often pushed onto fragile, barely farmable land just to survive. It's a system that's almost perfectly designed for inequality. But here's the kicker. All that overproduction in the industrial world, it comes at a staggering price. The very policies that were designed to create all this abundance were also systematically destroying the environment that agriculture completely depends on. And the report doesn't pull any punches. It catalogs the damage in grim detail. I mean, think about it. Intensive farming was just wearing out the soil. All those chemical fertilizers were running off into rivers and poisoning the water. And entire rural landscapes, hedges, greenbelts, the very things that naturally protect our watersheds were just being wiped out, all in the name of maximizing output. You know, during the public hearings for the report, someone said something that just completely reframes the whole issue. This quote right here, it calls the push for cheap food a form of economic violence. That's such a powerful idea. It's not just a market trend. It's a policy that forces farmers and the land itself into a cycle they can't escape from. Okay, so if that's the story in the developed world, the problem gets even worse in developing nations. The report identifies this absolutely devastating feedback loop, a downward spiral where poverty drives environmental destruction, and that destruction then makes poverty even deeper. This quote from the report is, well, it's chilling, because it shows you exactly how poverty becomes this active force of destruction. When your family's survival is on the line, you're forced to make impossible choices. You cut down the last tree for firewood. You let your cattle graze until the pasture is gone. You try to farm on steep hillsides that you know will just wash away. And this is that vicious cycle, laid out step by step. It's a trap. It starts with poverty, which pushes people onto bad land. Then, just to get by, they have to overuse it, which leads to deforestation and erosion. Of course, that degraded land produces even less food, which, you guessed it, pushes them deeper into poverty. And the whole cycle just starts all over again, worse than before. And the scale of this, I mean, it's hard to even wrap your head around, even back then. The report found that every single year, 6 million hectares of good, productive land was basically turning into desert. Just gone, an irreversible loss. And the forests were disappearing even faster. 11 million hectares a year. That's like losing an area the size of India every 30 years. And a lot of that land becomes so damaged, it just can't support life anymore. So, what's the solution? Well, the report argued that just tinkering with the system wasn't going to cut it. No. What was needed was a complete overhaul of the global economic system for agriculture. A kind of new deal for the world's poorest farmers, all based on shifting the terms of trade. So, what are terms of trade? It's a really important idea. Let's say you're a farmer and you grow coffee beans. The terms of trade describe how many bags of coffee you need to sell to buy, say, a tractor. Now, if coffee prices fall while the price of that tractor goes up, your terms of trade have gotten worse. You're having to export more of your product just to import the same stuff you need. And this is where the report gets really bold. It says that to solve hunger, you have to fix this fundamental economic imbalance. The whole system has to be rewired to give small farmers a fair shot, to make sure they're getting paid fairly for what they produce. So this is basically the roadmap the report gave us. And it's a really comprehensive vision. It says, hey, stop paying for overproduction in rich countries. End the trade practices like dumping cheap surpluses that absolutely crush poor farmers. Guarantee fair prices and market access. Invest in the right kind of technology for places that don't have a lot of resources. And, crucially, reform land ownership and create other jobs in rural areas so people aren't forced to destroy the land to survive. It's about building an entirely new system, from the ground up. So, the diagnosis was clear. The solutions were all there on the page, and that was over 3 decades ago. But here we are. The great food paradox is still with us. Millions of people still go hungry in a world that has plenty of food, and small farmers are still fighting against a system that feels completely stacked against them. So the final question, the one this report really leaves us with, is why? Why, after all this time, has so little really changed?